Welcome to another edition of Crime News with Mark Solomon. It's Tuesday, June 22nd, and today we're going to be talking a lot more about Alex Cox's death. We're going to be talking about what might have killed him. We're going to be talking about his autopsy report, what's in it, what's not in it. We're also going to be talking about Tammy Daybell and what might have killed her. This is kind of a second-parter, so you should probably watch the video that I'm going to put the card to here first. It's from yesterday, and stick around. Don't miss this one. But before we get to that, don't forget to click like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Click the little bell to be notified of future videos, and I'm sure there's going to be more. So first off, yesterday's video, let's talk about that. That had a lot of comments. So many comments, so many theories, so many great ideas, and spoiler alert for the end of this first section, one comment stood out to me, and that's by Renee XXX. Give him a hefty dose of vitamin K. We're talking about Alex Cox's death. I can't really call it a murder. It's not even being investigated from what I know, but it's just too strange not to be called a murder. So she says, give him a hefty dose of vitamin K. That's what they gave me when my blood was thinner. And we're going to talk about that too. But let's just jump into Alex Cox. So he died. We need to talk about what caused his death. Now, all of these links that I'm going to be showing you, all of these pages I'm going to be linking to in the description so you can read them yourself. You don't have to take my word for what's in them. But it says here, December 12th, Gilbert, Arizona Police Department called to Cox's home where he lived with his wife, Zulema. The stepson found him, 51 years old, lying on the floor of the bathroom, gasping for air as vomit came from his mouth. Remember that. That's important. They called 911. He was taken to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Now, the autopsy, we can see that. It's not very long. You should read it. But it is here. So first thing, this was about 3 days after the death. And it says here, primary cause of death is bilateral pulmonary thrombosis. Now, that really caught my attention first off. Why is that? Because most of the time somebody dies from a pulmonary embolus, that's a blood clot in your lung. You don't get it in both lungs. It's a blood clot that typically breaks through, you have a blood clot in your legs or someplace else. It breaks free, gets to your heart. It can only go to two places from the doctors that I've talked to. One is your brain, that's called a stroke, and the other one is in your lungs, and that's called a pulmonary embolus. It would be extremely strange and unusual to have a bilateral pulmonary embolus, from what I understand. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. But that really stuck out at me. And remember, we're not going to be getting much into the science here, folks, so don't worry about that. Contributory cause of death was heart disease, high blood pressure, that sort of thing. He had an enlarged heart. Who is it who did this medical exam, and were they qualified? Because I know different states have different types of systems where the person doing the medical exam doesn't necessarily need to be a doctor. Well, in this case, it was Lindsay Wallace, DO. So you got to figure, what's a DO? Short answer is DO is a doctor of osteopathic medicine, which is essentially the same thing. They go to basically the same schools, basically the same training, and they do basically the same things. Slightly different wording, but don't worry about it. This person was almost certainly qualified to do the medical exam. Past that, let's look at the tox screen, because that's what I've been focusing on. And here's the toxicology report from NMS Labs. And the only things they found in Alex's system were caffeine, naloxone, creatine, sodium, potassium chloride, and urea nitrogen. Okay. I'm not going to go over these. I'm going to say most of these are normal. The naloxone is an anti-opioid, which I'm guessing maybe he had an addiction issue. He was treating that, some sort of substance use disorder. It's not unusual. It certainly wouldn't have caused his death, nor would the caffeine or the creatine. Potassium can stop somebody's heart. That's not what happened here. So, and the level's only at a 13. It's not that high. It wouldn't be enough to stop his heart. They did these tests with gray top tubes, which we touch every day in every single DUI here in Colorado. Those they have an anticoagulant in the preservative. There's a preservative and an anticoagulant. Both of them are in there. That's just for evidentiary purposes, and that's for the femoral blood. They also did vitreous fluid and urine. And again, that's all they found. Now, I was mostly concerned, or at least curious as to what else was searched for. In other words, are any of these substances that, all of viewers here in these videos have been thinking about, were they in his blood? And the answer is they don't appear to be. They were looking for chloride, glucose, potassium, sodium, urea, nitrogen. They were looking for creatine, barbiturates, cannabinoids. That's THC. Gabapentin, salicylates. They were looking for acetone, ethanol, isopropanol, and methanol. Other things that they were looking at are listed right down here. So if you look at it, I am on page, let's see, what is this? That's the last page. And what they're talking about is all the other things that typically get looked for in a tox screen, right? Which is amphetamines, anticonvulsants, antidepressants, antihistamines, all the way through there, methyl relaxants and so forth, including opiates and opioids. They didn't find anything else. So my first thought is, from my video yesterday, I was talking about organophosphate poisoning, which is pesticides, right? What they do is they act on the blood to create certain chemicals in the blood which cause muscle overstimulation for the most part. In fact, organophosphate poisoning, a chronic one, as in over a long amount of time, has been linked to the Gulf War syndrome, because there were a lot of organophosphates and pesticides there, and also in nerve gas, part of what this does. It doesn't tend to cause people to die the way that Alex Cox died. In other words, he was vomiting and he was gasping for air. And the organophosphates tend to cause what they say is muscle overstimulation, like convulsing. So in other words, I'm starting to backtrack on the organophosphate poisoning. So I started looking at, especially after seeing this autopsy report with the bilateral pulmonary embolus, what the heck else could it be? So I listened to all of you and I read all of your comments for the most part, and I was trying to figure out what else it could be. And I started looking at a lot of other things, and what I found was people have been talking about heavy metals poisoning. In other words, did Zelima give him all sorts of other things as a holistic healer? And the answer is those probably would have shown up in a tox screen. Now, I did talk to a doctor who does have board certification in forensics, and he said that organophosphates probably would have shown up in that tox screen, even though those compounds in the blood weren't listed. And my question to him was, wouldn't a CBC have been a better way to go as far as trying to find out the blood chemistry? And he says, yes, but they probably would have shown up. And I said, okay, I understand. I'm not convinced of that. I only asked one forensics doctor, so let's go from here. Heavy metals, again, those probably would have shown up. Again, they were looking for potassium. They were looking for all those sorts of other things. Next question is, again, would autopsy have failed to discover those? I don't make this stuff up. All the links are going to be in the description below. Read this. This is an older article. It's from 1988. However, it was talking about the 8 million chemical compounds on Earth, and even the most sophisticated coroner's labs test only checked for a few hundred of them. What could have been introduced into Alex Cox's body that might have caused this bilateral pulmonary embolus, which was not detectable? Okay. Somebody talked about thallium poisoning, and the problem with thallium poisoning is it does not cause blood clots, doesn't cause pulmonary embolus, doesn't cause strokes. It causes other things. This is a 1992 U.S. Public Health Service report. I've scanned it. Nothing about blood clots. So thallium, good call, because it was a drug of choice. It's colorless, odorless, but doesn't cause what killed Alex Cox. So the next thing we start looking at is this malachite green. Malachite green is a copper-heavy, copper-dense mineral substance, which is also used in the food industry as far as aquatics for dyeing fish, and it's got some controversial uses. However, it does kill people, especially in large amounts. And the problem with that in this case is, again, does not cause pulmonary embolus. If you look at the toxicity and the effects here, this is an article from the National Institute of Health. The dye has generated much concern using its use. The toxicity increases with time, temperature, and concentration. And last one I thought was interesting, respiratory toxicity, which could have accounted for the rasping of breath, the gasping for air, but not the blood clots. And the blood clots in his lungs would far more explain his gasping for air. Now, the vomiting, not so much, but if you're gasping for air enough, it's like coughing too much. It can cause vomiting. So malachite green, you know, they did have access to it. From what I understand, they had jewelry that was made with malachite. It just does not seem like that was the likely culprit. So going back to the vitamin K, vitamin K, again, this is just WebMD, plays a key role in helping the blood clot. Well, that's the first thing in this entire article. Group of compounds and so forth, read that. I'm not going to get into it. What I will say is here, this is a vitamin K fact sheet for health professionals. And it talks very much about how it causes your blood to clot. So if there was a blood clotting agent introduced into Alex Cox's blood, well, gosh, that makes a whole lot of sense why you would have clotting on both sides of the lung as opposed to just one, which you would expect under a naturally forming blood clot. So again, put in the comments, if you know more about this medical phenomenon of bilateral PE, you let me know. I'd love to hear what you have to say on the subject, but it feels, looks, and sounds like he was given some sort of a clotting agent, and that's what killed him, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to Tammy Daybell. So I was mostly interested, once reading that, what did her autopsy say? And sadly, it has been sealed. Now, this autopsy was started, her body was exhumed, the autopsy was completed. Slew of articles, it started February 4, 2021. And the problem is that, here, the contents of this report will be made public, will not be made public at this time, as its evidence is an open and ongoing investigation. Now, granted, that was almost 6 months ago. We will release additional information as it becomes available. I have scoured, literally, I have scoured the indictment. There is nothing about a cause of death for Tammy Daybell. She's in the indictment, which means they say that Lori and Chad killed her. The real question is how. And so what with the original trial date being back in May, they have got to, this information has got to be released at some point. We need to know this information if we're going to figure out if these two things are related. And if Alex, if his death was related to her death, and as far as manner, means, and way of death, that's something that we need to know. Interesting about her case is that, from best I can tell, this article from KSL.com says that she's a 49-year-old mother of 5 and in good health and training for a race. And folks, 49-year-old, 51-year-old people do not just keel over and die of natural causes, especially when they're related to the the murders of 2 children. When you lump the kids and the spouses of Chad and Lori together, there's only one way to say it. They were baggage. They were all murdered. And that's what they should be tried for, because that's what makes the most sense. So I'm going to put my money on vitamin K poisoning for Alex Cox. Hopefully, that's something that science can tell us. If you have something you'd like to contribute to this, please let me know in the comments. I think we've gone way too long in this video as it is. That is what I wanted to get through to you guys. And if you have anything you'd like to contribute, please put them in the comments below. Tag me on Twitter or email me. As always, we're going to follow up on whatever leads you give. Really appreciate your participation with yesterday's video. Let me know if you agree with me today or not. We will see you back here soon.